Good morning, guys. Time for Matthew 18. This is Matthew 18. At the same time came the disciples unto Jesus, saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Now, this is really kind of interesting. These guys are. We have a tendency to think of the disciples as being these great spiritual giants, and in a way they were, but it wasn't until after the resurrection that happened, because they're not really born again at this point. They're really just natural men, men before they were born from above. So they don't have the new spirit. They're very fleshly, and consequently they're kind of competitive when it comes to jockeying for position in the circle of 12. You can see this more in Mark 9, Luke 9, and I got Luke 22 in here too. Thought it would be a John. But anyway, let's go look at these verses. This is Mark 9, 33 through 37. And he came to Capernaum, and being in the house, he asked them, "What was it that ye disputed among yourselves by the way?" But they held their peace, for by the way they had disputed among themselves who should be the greatest. And he sat down and called the 12, and saith unto them, "If any man desireth to be first, the same shall be last of all, and servant of all." And he took a child, and set him in the midst of them. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said unto them, "Whosoever shall receive one of such children in my name receiveth me. And whosoever shall receive me receiveth not me, but him that sent me." So here we see that Jesus is turning the world upside down, really. The kingdom is upside down compared to our way things work here. And it's even that way in our churches. If you go to a church, usually you think of the greatest person in the church as being the pastor, but Jesus is saying the greatest person is the person who serves. And he set that as an example. He did it here, but he also did it when he washed the disciples' feet. He said, "No servant is greater than his master." So, and if he's washing, if the master is washing his servant's feet, then to be the greatest means you be the servant. To be the servant is to be the greatest in the kingdom. But we have that kind of upside down in this world, and it's upside down in the church too. We have a tendency to think of the pastor as being the greatest, and the elders and the deacons and the like. And we have a tendency to think of people, the more famous they are, the greater they are. Then it's not that way in the kingdom. So let's look at the next one. Next reference, which was Luke 9:46 through 48. Then there arose a reasoning among them, which of them should be greatest. And Jesus, perceiving the thought of their heart, took a child and set him by, and said unto them, "Whosoever shall receive this child in my name receiveth me, and whosoever shall receive me receiveth him that sent me. For he that is least among you all, the same shall be great." And then the last reference is Luke 22:24 through 30. "And there was also strife among them, which of them should be accounted the greatest. And he said unto them, The kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and they that exercise authority upon them are called benefactors. But ye shall not be so, but he that is greatest among you, let him be as the younger, and be that is chief, as he that doth serve. For whether is greater, he that sitteth at meat, or he that serveth? Is not he that sitteth at meat? But I am among you as he that serveth. Ye are they which have continued with me in my temptations, and I appoint you a kingdom, as my Father hath appointed unto me, that ye may eat and drink at my table in the kingdom, and sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. So you got the disciples jockeying for position, trying to figure out how they can be greater than each other. And Jesus called, this is verse 2, and Jesus called a little child unto him and set them in the midst of them and said, Verily I say unto you, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Now this is where we get the religious term of converted. It used to be a popular term when I was a teenager. Instead of being someone asking you if you were born again, they would ask you if you've been converted. Now that word converted here is not what we think of as converted. It means to be willing to be a child again, since entry is by the new birth. The great thing about the new birth is that you can mature as fast as you want. In the physical, you're a child. There's a progression that takes years and years and years in order to be fully grown. In the spiritual, you can grow as fast as you want. You can be, and there's plenty of people that they've been born again since they were like 6 years old, and they're not any more mature Christian-wise than they were when they were 6. And then you got people that get born again, and within 6 months, they're out healing the sick and raising the dead, casting out demons. I'll put a link to a video. It was one of the videos that got me interested in this direction of actually moving in the spiritual. And these guys were not born again more than 9 months, but they were out on the street healing the sick and converting people. So to be willing to be a child again is what converted. It means reverted. Not converted, it means reverted. It means repenting back to a beginning. Now, this is one reason I think that there seems to be more women, born-again women, than men in family units. Because if the woman gets born again first, the husband doesn't want to be thought of, and then this is all spiritual, doesn't want to be thought of as being immature, less mature than his wife in the faith, and he's not willing to be reverted. He doesn't want to be in that situation, because men have, just as women need love, men need respect. So they feel they're losing respect if they accept Jesus and they're in a position where their wife knows more than they do. So as a wife, you guys that are wives to husbands that aren't born again, you need to somehow convey to your husband that you will be under him when he accepts Jesus. I don't know how you would do that, but you need to do that just for this respect that he needs. So it's something that men need. Men need respect. Women need love, and that's why Scripture tells the man to love his wife and the woman to respect her husband. It's because that's what they need. The wife needs love. The husband needs respect. So, and let's read that again. And said, Verily I say unto you, except you be converted and become as little children, you shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Now, to be humble doesn't mean to think little of yourself. That's one of the tricks is the world plays on you, is that somebody who's humble is somebody that thinks little of themselves, but it's not. I heard some Facebook friend posted one that was a better saying than this, but my mentor used to say, being humble doesn't mean thinking little of yourself. It means not thinking of yourself at all. But this other phrase is a little bit more catchier, which is being humble does not mean thinking little of yourself. It means thinking of yourself little. And that's basically it. It's kind of what you would feel like when you're watching. If you go to a movie and you're watching a movie, you're not really thinking of yourself. You're not really self-conscious. Your attention is in the movie and what's going on with the movie. And that's the way it should be in life. Your attention should be outward, not inward. But because of sin, because of our sinful nature, We have a tendency to focus in and focus on ourselves, just like these guys were focusing on how to be the greatest instead of just being a servant. See, if you're being a servant, if you're loving others and you're being a servant, you're not thinking, if you're thinking spiritually, you're not thinking of yourself, you're just thinking of others and loving on others. If you're in the flesh, you're thinking about, okay, I'm earning my position as being somebody greater by working, by helping people and loving on people. So your attention is on yourself. A little child doesn't really think, he's not really thinking of himself. I mean, he might have base desires, like he wants a toy or something like that. But in general, he's like a sponge. He believes everything that's said to him, and he is more conscious of what's going around him and not at himself. And that's what Jesus is saying here. Whosoever therefore shall humble himself as this little child, the same is greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Now, the little child is the word for toddler. So that gives you a kind of an age range. So it's probably a three-year-old or something about that, like that. And is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. Now, a child also believes what he's told instead of trying to figure out how it works. For instance, if you tell a child about Santa Claus and then he comes down the chimney to give gifts, a little toddler doesn't think, how does Santa Claus fit in the chimney? That was my biggest thing. Our fireplace was so narrow, I was going, how in the world does Santa Claus get down there? Of course, I was 6 or 7. I wasn't a toddler. But if you tell a toddler that, they don't really ask how it happens. They just believe whatever you tell them. You tell them about an Easter bunny, they believe it. It's the same thing about the kingdom of heaven. The phrase that kind of opened the reality of heaven and what it's like to me was actually from the movie Thor, where Thor is explaining to Jane, I guess is her name, how things work in Asgard. And the phrase he said was, your ancestors called it magic. You call it science. I come from a place where it's one and the same. And that's the way heaven is. Heaven is the way we can think of heaven. Heaven is science and magic at the same time. Not magic as in bad magic, but things work and we don't necessarily know how they work. That's the way healing is. I have a tendency to want to explain things, so I have a tendency to try to figure out how it works. But I start from the basis that it works, not from a basis of doubt, but a basis from amazement. It works, but how does it work? My wife is the exact opposite. She, when I'm sitting there trying to explain to her how I think it works, she's going, I don't care where it just works. So that's the way heaven is. Heaven, the power of God, when it heals somebody, it just works. I'm sitting there going, how is it working? A bone gets mended immediately. My wife just thinks it works. I'm thinking, all right, time has to increase. The speed of time has to increase so the cell divisions happen quicker. And there has to be some kind of nutrients in there that comes from the heavenly realm or whatever. Whatever it is, it works. But that's me. I'm trying to figure it out. But I believe it works first. And whosoever shall receive one such little child in my name receiveth me. But whosoever shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged around his neck and that he was drowned in the depth of the sea. Now, a millstone they had different size millstones. A millstone was it looks like a wheel with grooves cut in it. There was 2 of them, and one would turn on top of the other, but they were very heavy. They were round and had a hole in it. So this is very close to wearing cement overshoes. Offend there is the word cause to sin or cause to stumble. So if whosoever shall cause a child to stumble, For instance, if you tell a child that God is evil, or tell a child that they shouldn't believe in Jesus, or things like that, is causing a child to stumble. Or doing anything, offering them cigarettes. There's just about anything you can do that is going to cause them harm. It's better that you were drowned in the sea with a millstone. It says, "Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it needs be that offenses come." Offenses are going to come, but woe unto the world because of offenses. But woe to that man by whom the offense comes. Wherefore, if thy hand or thy foot offend thee, cut them off, and cast them from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life halt or maimed, rather than having 2 hands or 2 feet to be cast into everlasting fire. And if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out, and cast it from thee. It is better for thee to enter into life with 1 eye, rather than having 2 eyes to be cast into hellfire. This has a lot to do with the way the culture the Israelite culture was. They were very, I can never come up with the right term to describe it, but they were very physical oriented. They had a hard time thinking spiritually about anything. So a lot of everything was really physical to them. So trying to explain to them how important it was for them to not offend these children, Jesus brought it home by showing it in the physical reality of cutting off your hand or plucking out your eye. Now, of course, your eye is not going to offend you, and your hand isn't going to offend you. They don't think. It's your brain that does the thinking. So the importance is to realize that it's important that you don't offend the children, that you don't cause them to stumble. It's so important. It would be like cutting off your hand or cutting off your foot or plucking out your eye in order to keep from doing it. It's a way of showing how important it is not to offend the children. Okay, take heed that ye despise not one of these little ones. Because those previous verses sounded like he was talking about a different subject. He was talking about the children. And you can tell that because he continues talking about it right here. Take heed that you despise not one of these little ones. Despise there is the word that means to, let's see what it was. It's the word cataphronicity. Cataphronicity. But it means to think against, to disesteem. Disesteem, that's a good word for despise. It means to disesteem, which means to count of less value than it actually is. Similar verses when Jesus says, if you hate not your mother and father, you cannot be my disciple. But he's talking about disesteem them compared to him. So he's not saying actually hate. It's the same word, I believe. I'll check and make sure, but I'm pretty sure it's the same word. For I say unto you that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. He's still trying to drive home the fact that these children should be considered important. We would not consider it important in that culture. In that culture, they were considered almost like chattel. And he's trying to drive home the fact that they are very important and that they should be esteeming them. And he's saying here that that in heaven their angels do always behold the face of my Father which is in heaven. So when they see a child, they should be thinking that that child's angel is in front of the Father in heaven. For the Son of Man is come to save that which was lost. How think ye, if a man have 100 sheep, and one of them be gone astray, doth he not leave the 99 and goeth into the mountains, and seeketh that which he is gone astray? And if so be that he find it, verily I say unto you, he rejoiceth more of that sheep than of the 99 which went not astray. Even so he's still talking about children here, you can see it. Even so, it is not the will of your Father which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. This should give you Calvinists out there a pause. It's not the will of the Father that which is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. Now, do children perish? Yes, they do. But it's not the Father's will that they should perish. So the Father's will is not always done on earth. That's another, just more evidence that thinking like that God's will is always done on earth, is not the proper way to think. It's also very key if you look in the Lord's Prayer, it says one of what we're supposed to be praying is that His will would be done on earth as it is in heaven. If His will is always being done on earth, then the prayer doesn't make sense to be prayed, that part of the prayer. Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee one or two more, that in the mouth of two or more witnesses every word may be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as the heathen man and a publican. Now, don't just gloss over this word church. The church of Jesus Christ doesn't come about until after the resurrection. The word church is misunderstood. It is actually a Greek word. It was a secular word that meant it was a term for a group of people with a common interest and set of rules that governed the group. So you could say a Masonic lodge is a church. You could say that a Kiwanis Club is a church. You could say the stonemasons or any union that had to do with labor are churches, using this definition. And it was the definition that Jesus used for His church, but it was also the definition of synagogues. They were considered churches because they had rules, and that if violated, you could be put out of, and it affected membership. It's the same type of thing that we're talking about here. So, and if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if you neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as the heathen man and a publican. So he's talking about how to handle offenses. If you got a brother who steals from you or does something wrong, let's say he put a fence on his property and it crosses over on your property, you go to him and tell him, hey, you crossed the property and you need to take the fence down. He says, well, I'm not going to take it down. Well, then you go and you get a couple of other brothers to establish that there's a witness that he's not going to take it down, because it's the witness of two or three. Everything is supposed to be established according to the Israel law, Jewish law, and this is what we're still in the Old Testament. Really, I mean, we're in the New Testament, but we're still before the cross. So this is pre-cross stuff, which means this Jewish law is still in effect. So you have to have two or three witnesses. So you take two or three brothers back, and then you confront him again. And if he doesn't remove the fence, then you take him in front of the church. And if the church decides he still refuses, the church can decide to treat him, put him out of the church and treat him as a publican. Publican was considered, he was a tax collector, a Jewish tax collector working for the Roman government. So he was the lowest of the Jewish pecking order. He was the scum. Verily I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever shall be loosed on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now this is one, it's not a verily, verily, but it's a verily. When you remember when he says verily, he's getting ready to say something that's incredulous. Verily I say unto you, it's the combination of the verily and then I say unto you that gives it punch. He could have added another verily and it would have given it the ultimate punch. But verily I say unto you, so he's getting ready to say something incredulous. Whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now, many people will teach you that what that means is that what is bound in heaven you can bind on earth, and what is loosed in heaven can be loosed in earth. But that gets the verb tenses all wrong. What it's saying here is what you do here in the present will be done in heaven. Let's read it again. Whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Now this fits with what the verily I say unto you. He's getting ready to say something incredulous, so we should be looking for something that's hard to believe, or something we kind of go, no, that can't be true. There's got to be a temptation to say, no, that can't be true. If there's no temptation to say, no, that can't be true, then we're missing something. So he's saying that whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Again I say unto you, so he's repeating it in a different form, that if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. Now, the word ask there is an interesting word. It can mean ask, but it also can mean to call for or crave, desire, require. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're asking somebody to do something. It means that they're making a proclamation. It could be asking the Father, but it could also be making a proclamation. Recent thing, and I'm doing this myself. I haven't done it, but I've done similar stuff before. But I've recently read, and I'll post a link to it, of a guy who had mosquito problems. He had mosquito problems so bad he had put a zapper in his house, and he decided to start taking dominion over the mosquitoes because God said that he gave Adam dominion over the earth. So that means that we have dominion over the earth and the animals and plants. So that means whatever we command these things to do in faith, that it should happen. So he started cursing the mosquitoes, basically saying, you can't come in my house. If you come in my house, you're going to die. And he did that, and it didn't happen immediately, but over the summer, eventually there was no mosquitoes in his house. And he was telling the story to a couple of friends, and they pointed to his arm, and they looked startled and pointed at his arm, and when he looked at his arm, there were a bunch of mosquitoes flying around, but they would not land on the guy's arm. It was really very interesting. So we've had ant problems, so I'm doing it with the ants. And I'll give you a report on how that goes. Let's see. Again, I say that if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall thy brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Now, Peter thought he was being magnanimous here because the rabbis taught that you should forgive somebody 3 times. So Peter was kind of going with the 7 because 7 was the perfect number. But he thought he was really being magnanimous. And Jesus saith unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Therefore is the kingdom of heaven likened unto a certain king, which would take account of his servants. And when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him which owed him 10,000 talents. Now, 10,000 talents, that's kind of amazing to me, because the reference here says that a talent is 750 ounces of silver. So 10,000 talents calculates out to be about $40 million. Y'all might want to check my figures. Anyway, it's a lot of money. But for as much as he had not to pay, his Lord commanded him to be sold, and his wife and children and all that he had, and payment to be made. The situation this guy's in is that he owes this guy a bunch of money. His master, he's a slave. And because he doesn't have the money to pay, his master decides to sell him, sell his wife, and sell his children. Now, they're not going to the same place. They're all going to different places. Whoever buys them, and his family's getting broken up. The servant, look at the situation that he's in versus the situation he will end up being in. Let's put it that way. The servant therefore fell down and worshipped him, saying, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. Then the Lord of that servant was moved with compassion, and loosed him, and forgave him the debt. But the same servant went out and found one of his fellow servants, which owed him 100 pence. And he laid hands on him, and took him by the throat, and saying, Pay me what thou owest. Now 100 pence is $17. Still a lot different than the millions that he owed the other guy. And his fellow servant fell down at his feet, and besought him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. And he would not, but went out and cast him into prison till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what was done, they were very sorry, and came and told unto their Lord all that it was done. Then his Lord, after that he had called him, said unto him, O thou wicked servant, I forgave thee all that debt, because thou desirest me. Shouldst not thou also have had compassion on thy fellow servant, even as I had pity on thee? And his Lord was wroth, and delivered him to the tormentors, till he should pay all that was due unto him. This is where they got debtor's prison from in England in the old days. In England in the old days, if you owed money and you couldn't pay, you were thrown in debtor's prison until your relatives could come up with the money to get you out. And while they were in debtor's prison, they sometimes, depending on who had them in the prison, they could be tortured, which was drive the family of the person give them more motivation to go out and find money to get him out. That was the whole point. So likewise, all right, and his Lord was wroth, and delivered him to the tormentors till he should pay all that was due unto him. It would have been better if he'd gotten sold, is the point. So likewise shall my heavenly Father do also unto you, if ye from your hearts forgive not every one of his brothers their trespasses. So this is a verse that a lot of people use to show that there's discrepancy in Scripture, because here we have a verse that says in order to be forgiven by God, you have to forgive everybody. But there's a verse in Ephesians 4:32 that says, And be ye kind one to another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. So in this verse, in Matthew, it's saying you have to forgive in order to be forgiven. In Ephesians, it says you forgive because you are forgiven. And that's the key. The key is that we're talking about two different dispensations. So those of you that don't believe in dispensations, this is some evidence of it. In this dispensation that Jesus was talking to his disciples, they were still before the cross. It was still in the previous. They were still in the previous testament. They're still in the old covenant was still in effect. But after the cross, once you have been saved, you are forgiven. And because you are forgiven, you're supposed to forgive others. Now, you can be disobedient, but you're still forgiven. Oh, and that's the end. I thought I had more to go. But we don't. That's it. So that's the end of Matthew 18. Hopefully we'll get to Matthew 19 shortly. So you guys have a great day.